Alright guys, welcome back to another session for our building some secure, scalable, fault-tolerant and low latency applications using Spring Boot and Java. My name is Dan Emmanuel and I have been your course instructor throughout this course, and I'm going to continue in that role. Today we are going to be refactoring the code because I want to build out a full scale, or at least not a mini version, like a mini version of a production security for authentication system that will protect your users and your resources, that's including your different service class. And I thought to myself, rather than creating multiple microservices, we're going to work with a monolith, but we're going to use a feature-based approach, right? Or not, let me say service-based approach, where each service is going to be extracted into its own package. So in the sense that we're going to extract the authentication service in its own package, and it's going to contain all its dependencies and all its implementations, and so that in case you want to extract them into their own repository or their own microservices, you can just copy that and paste it in a different Spring Boot application and make a few package changes, and that will be it. So right now, the idea, first of all, let me talk about the idea, is that I want to basically build out a full-scale authentication, but it's not going to be as sophisticated as some of the the ones that cloud providers use, but I'm just trying to give you a proper idea, a proper understanding of protecting your server, your APIs, and the resources that sit behind the authentication service and layers. Okay, because something like requests, like we spoke about multiple aspects about protecting not just against unauthorized access through role verification, but you also have to verify against business logic, and you have to understand how to make sure that how to implement that kind of verification. For example, you're going to have different kind of policies. If you are using policy-based access control, you're going to have different kind of policies. You're going to have system policies, which those are hard-coded, and then you're also going to have business rules. Those are policies, but those ones change ever so often, right? So you have to understand how you implement that and how you verify. And one of the key things we're going to be using is called aspect-oriented programming, which we saw before, though I did not really highlight it here. But this is what I'm talking about. It's called aspect-oriented programming. And essentially, it allows you to intercept the entire flow of your system, right, from a particular point, and then provide you with so allows you to intercept the system, right, and then make sure that you basically run a method and some checks and some verification before you continue the processing. And these are very important in terms of role-based access control, attribute-based access control, and policy-based access control. And we implemented this when we were doing our filter-based, where method-based access, method-based restrictions and validation, right? And I spoke about how we implemented this rule, and this is about requiring rule, and we use the annotation called require rule, and then we pass in the rule that we want to require. And so in this particular implementation, we just get the rule, get the context, and then we get the rule from the annotation, the parameters passed in the annotation. And this is very important aspect-based control because it's very powerful, and it is highly used in systems, especially in Java Spring Boot systems, to make sure that you perform some action before. And there are other other annotations like we have the after, right? We have the after, so we have the after annotation. We also have the, I think, I don't know, around. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to find out, around. And there are some others that we can use, and we are going to be using to implement this aspect-based control. And I just wanted to introduce this. So in the next couple of videos, which are all going to be practical sessions, we are going to be implementing a full-based access control, which is going to protect against is going to protect your user and user actions, and it's going to protect your resources and how they are being accessed, and it's going to implement system-based systems policies and business rules that are changing often, and you're going to see how those are used to make sure that you don't just have the rules, but the actions you perform are within the acceptable format described in the business rules. All right. So you don't want somebody who has the ability to the rule, like an admin, to that says, okay, I have the rule delete an admin to just go and delete every user in your system. You want to, maybe your business will say that an admin can only delete or perform certain actions, modify or change data based on the person who is directly under him or is managing. And those are business rules that are being put in place, and they can change depending on how the business see it fit. And you want to know that, okay, this is how I'm going to implement X and this is how I'm going to implement Y. So for today, now that I've gotten out of the way, we are going to be looking at refactoring this entire code. So this will be the first video, and basically I want to take all of these and I want to divide them into two main sections. So the first one we are going to have is a package called auth, right? So we're going to have an auth package, okay? And we're going to start it with a capital letter because these are services, right? Usually if you're going to name like a service, you're going to have like service, the name and stuff. So I'm going to keep it with the capital letter here. And so what this is going to take into account is all our auth implementations, okay? So we have things like rate limiting, things like security, right? And all of these are going to be out. So if we could just take all of that and we refactor all, we're going to do a lot of refactoring. And it's also, so what again do we have? So we have that auth. I think we have the context. Context, what is context? Yeah. We also do have the configurations, right? And these configurations are found in the filters and the interceptor configuration. Interceptor will also be in the authentication. So that includes authentication authorization. So we have filters and config. So we're just going to move that in here too. No, we don't want to do that too. We don't want to remove that directory. So we are going to put config, and what this will happen is we're going to put auth and we're going to rename that, and it's not going to be on the security, it's just going to be on the auth. We're going to refactor. So yeah, so we have something like that. And then we are going to have I think the exceptions are also kind of there, but so what I'll do is, rather than do all of that in there, I'm going to just create the Java, no, it's not, I'm going to create a package, and I'm simply just going to do exceptions, right? Exception, so it's not double, it's not S, and I'm going to remove all of these auth related exceptions, so forbidding auth exception, JWT exception, invalid token exception, rate limit exception, user not authorized exception, validation exception. I don't know, that is probably for something else, and I'm just going to remove all of them and put them here in the exception category, and I'm going to refactor that in. And of course, we're going to have our global exception handler. I'm simply just going to copy in that, and I'm going to paste the global exception handler somewhere there. And what's going to happen is I'm going to now just look at the global exception handler and make sure that it's just handling method argument not valid. This is for validation exception. I don't think we need that there. But yeah, for login and logout, we'll need that, so we can keep that there. User not found. Yeah, this will also be needed in the login logout. So okay, so we have that there. So user not found exception, we can also just keep that there, refactor. No, I think user not found will be in the user exceptions, because authentication is stateless, so we will not really need to do user not found, because this requires us to go to the database. So I don't think that is going to do. Alright, so no, what am I doing? Right, so I'm going to get back this user not found, and I'm going to put them back in these other exceptions here. And validation exception, we're going to be validating input. But for authentication, the authentication really just validates. I think it really just validates the user against the claims. And then the authorization, though, is the one that is going to be requesting information, but we are not going to be doing the user not found for authorization, because we already validated the claim, then we already validated the user, and we can use information from the claims against the user. But so anyway, we'll create that as we go when we implement that. So for now, we will just omit that, and then we have validation exception, method argument not valid exception. Okay, this is for our custom validation that we did the other time. Anyway, so for now, we'll clean that up as we go, but I think for most of the cases, we're going to use all of that. And so for exceptions are done. I think rate limiting also needs to get in there for auth. So we are going to be doing our custom rate limiting, which we already implemented. We have the in-memory rate limiter. So we have details, exception, controller, mappers. Let me see, register user mapper, Right, this is for adapting our users, our objects. So this is a model, and this is a repository. We'll not be needing that for the authentication section. So the service, file service, user service, we'll not be needing that either. Utilities, JWT, let me see. Right, so I created this file, so I'm not going to be using it. I think this was for, I wanted to do some other computation there on a JWT, but thing like get expiration time and all of those other functions would have been from here. So, but I'm just going to remove that. since they are not being used. So just clean up the code right there. Validator, utilities of validator, validator implementation. I think this is for validate inputs. Validator not. So we have some. So we have to fix this because it's a bit confusing. But I understand this was our demonstration for to validate our inputs from the user to make sure that the character does not contain special, the string that's being sent does not contain special characters. So for now, I think our auth is, so I'm going to go ahead and close all of this just to have a clean sheet of tabs that we are using at every moment. Okay. Okay. So login user. Right, so we have now our auth. We have our config, which is our filter config. So we're going to check them for any errors. No, I don't think there are errors. So the rate limiter. And the interceptor config with our interceptor. This is for more section based authorization, and exceptions are good. Rate limiter. Okay, so that is good. Security, we have auth. I'm just going to rename this rather than auth. It's supposed to be auth service. Right, so auth service. Right, so refactor. So I have auth service of. I have API key for API authentication. This is just a demo. Then we have basic username and password again. And then we have JWT. Oh, okay. That's weird. Because I'm seeing. Oh, okay. So, okay, I see. I was confused. I thought all of this were under details. I was wondering. I was beginning to wonder. So yeah, that's the JWT authenticator that gets the barrier token. I think we also add the cookies here. JWT cookie for HTTP only request. That's for the web-based application. So it's going to search for JWT and it's going to search for barrier token, and we're also going to look for JWT authenticator for barrier. Yeah, anyway. And then we have the properties. Of course, this is for secret, the issuer, the token time to live. Then for the blacklist, that's just in memory for blacklist hash map. And then we have the JWT token parser, and that's for validating the JWT token. We have the method JWT token parser. Okay, here is it. And the passes it, it returns JWT.pass builder, and it does all of the checks, and then we do this in is valid method. We then implement, we then calls it, and then also checks for expiration date, which, like I said, it's not really needed, because once you pass the token, if it's expired, this throws an exception, that's JWT expired exception, which again you saw the other class, and you also have the JWT token provider, and we're going to be using JWT, although I'm going to leave the basic and the API just for the purpose that this is a tutorial, but this is what we're going to be using, the JWT. And then we have the public endpoint, which basically grants access to public endpoint, and this is going to just, so this is basically just going to run the rate limiting and all that things there. So rate limiting and every other thing, I think they are in the filter config. We start with course here, and then rate limiting, yes, before authentication filter, yeah. So I think this auth is good. Then the context, obviously, is our context, which is a static point, and uses a thread local to make sure that every thread has its own local variable. And then we have the filters, auth filter, which basically does a filtering, right? So this I will move that because let's see the set, so we don't want to get that again. I was just testing the other day. I think you guys know. So filter shader filter. Yes. And then the course filter. These are just basic filters. And the weight limiter. Again. So for the auth, I think the auth service is done, because if we follow now, it's going to say we send a request, it's going to get to the it's going to go to the filter section, and it's going to be intercepted there. It's going to do the security filter, it's going to run the auth filter, and the auth filter is going to call auth.authenticate, and it's going to send the request. And if this is JWT, which in most from henceforth is going to be JWT, is going to pick up the JWT implementation here, and it's simply just going to ask is a token valid, which is going to check the claims using the JWT token passer, and it's also going to check the time and other things. And then if it is valid, it's going to, if it's not valid, it's going to return a false. If it is valid, it's going to create the user details, and from the user details, it's going to create an auth user. Then we're going to set the context. Okay, it's just going to return the new auth user, and it's in the filter that we are going to set the context. Then we're going to continue the request, which is now going to move to the interception level if there are any interceptors to be run for that particular section that the code is going to, or the request is going to. So for now, I'll say that we have removed, right? So we're not writing tests yet, of course. We'll handle those cases, but just for a rule of thumb, if you're developing and you're writing functions, it's important that you write the test alongside the function. For now, we will have another some lessons to handle test cases and different tests. So yeah, I think the auth, it's kind of good. So the auth service is there. You also have annotation And this is for, I think this is for users. And so we're going to create a new package, which is going to be user service. Okay. And essentially, these are our resources. So these are our resources, and annotations will be the user service. But also, I just want to clarify something. If you're going a monolith, and if this indeed is a monolith, and you want to do is there are certain global things that every other method or multiple methods will access. Right now, why it's important to try to make every service self-contained, that will also introduce repetition. And in most cases, as you go, they'll tell you that it's better to have repetitions um, and couple structure. But just for those who don't really are not familiar with certain concepts, but what I'm trying to pass is that sometimes you also just allow certain globally accessed resources at a global level and let each resource or service access that resource from the global level. But that comes to the problem, but that will cause a problem down the line if it ever happens. If you want to extract, say, a user service into another its own application, then what you have to do is that you have to take those globally accessed and make sure that it's self-contained within the user. And if you have to do that for multiple services, that becomes a little bit bulky. So most of the times they ask one of the very important question is that look at yourself and ask yourself, if I'm creating a monolith like this, how long do I estimate at least before I'll be required to extract each of these to its own service, or will that ever be a need case, and how long will it take? And based on your answer, you say in the next 10 years, then just keep them global. But if it's in the you know and the global is going to give you a centralized space of management, right? And even things like config, they are globally accessed here, right? Most of your configurations are going to be global. But also there are other things that they're just service dependent. That's when they're self-contained. But again, if you have like a plan in the next 1 or 2, 3 years to extract this into their own microservices, so their own applications, then just make sure that you do everything here to be self-contained. So like now I can extract this application into its own microservice, right? And what I will need to do is come here, and because I think the secrets and stuff, right? So in its own microservice, its POM file, I need to copy all of these and then you know put them there just to make sure that they can access it when creating the AWT token, the secrets and stuff. I hope that makes sense. So we have the user service, and as you can see, we have the model. And what we can do is just put our user service in the model and the repository, user service, the model. So we refactor that, and we're just going to rename, and we are going to remove the model part. And you have the user service then, and you have the details, the user service, and you have the service layer in the user service. So you see that the file, in this case, we have a file service, and it was like an example just for file handling and stuff. But let's just say we might have a file service, right? In this case, what I want to do here is just might just even just copy it here and paste it in there, right? Then go to the, and what I will do is that the file service I will not copy, right? I will just copy in there. Right? So you go to user service, now you have the service, you have just the file service. Oh, okay, so that was Git. I thought that was so we can just delete the file service. right? And then in the service area, what we do, we can just delete the user service. Okay. Um, so it's being used a lot of places, right? And so I see what's happening there. So right now, we should just select the service, and I will tell you what's happening there is that this user service is being used in a lot of in the service area in the service sections, and what in the controller, by the way. So if we have like a controller here, you see file and user. So right now we are not really. I will just put in a file just for some information. So we don't need a file service or file controller. I could delete that immediately and just take the controller class and put it in the user service. And in the service class, we don't need a file service again. Um, these are just checks, right? I was for that for the tutorial later. I'll delete that. Uh, and we can just put the service in the user class. Okay. And of course, we have the validators which are all being used. The util, so we can have things like utilities, global utilities. You could keep them global, right? But again, like I told you, if you have plans to extract them to their own stuff later, you should definitely. So we have validators. Um, okay, so I just extracted the validator by itself. Validator is never used. Three usage, public void. No usage. Input tree. Alright, checking here is empty. Field is not empty. So I don't think. Oh, let me see. I don't think. Let me look at the usage. User service Java. Private final validator. Validator implementation. Oh, so this is like the service class. Okay, so user service or user service. Okay, I was really confused there. And since it's like user services, we could. So the validator, we use the validator here, and then do we ever use it somewhere? I don't know if we ever use this. No uses found in this project, so we never used this. It was just there for so no error, and that implementation now I think goes away because here is the only implementation that we implement validation. If you look at the implementation usage, user service in the import section, so and that goes to, and so the only place now is here, and so the validator, it's not exactly valid, so we are not really using anything here, right? So we will just so you go ahead and delete that, all of it, so that doesn't cause any breakpoint. And so we have a util class which is now useless and we're not using it yet. So we can just put it in there, just to, and we might eventually use it. And then we have the validator, which is our notation. And I think that, I don't know if we like put it in annotations. Yeah. Go have encrypted no character special annotation. And we have the annotation implementation listeners. So we could take the annotations and put here. And then the validator should be under annotation listeners. So we could have something like that, and then this validator also now just becomes useless, so we could just delete that, right? And so we have annotation, encrypt, no special character, although we have like different name here, require rule, and this one there is no particular, the implementation is an aspect oriented programming implementation, and essentially it is found in the oh, I see. It's found in the interceptor, which will be the auth service, and that will be in the auth service, security, interceptor AOP, yes. And what we can do is we could basically just copy all of this and replicate it here. And basically we are in the service, user service, and we can have interceptor, right? AOP, and then this will be moved down here because it's only being used in the aspect of user method, so the AOP here can be deleted, and we're going to remove that there. Okay, so we have so in our user service we have annotations, the annotations themselves, and this annotation for require rule, which is then implemented in the interceptor AOP, which authorized aspect, and this is what I'm talking about. This is the implementation here, right? And this require rule, basically it's the annotation itself, right? And the only place we are using it, it's within the user, and I think the user service, where we require rule to run a method here. There we go. And this was like a demo, right, just to show updates, and maybe only admins can update. And that's why I moved it from the auth service, because it's basically not part of the auth service, it's part of the user service and implementation themselves. In that way, if I want to extract this, I basically just take it out, and there is no error, no broken messages. Let me see, is that all? So let's close the auth service. And we also have exceptions, global exception handler, and in this case I don't think any of these exceptions are being handled again. But the forbidden exception will be used. method argument will be used. User note, and this method argument is basically for the annotation characters. I think this annotation, because we'll do it, we'll implemented it with through an exception, and this it throws a method argument exception, and then this catches it when it catches it. Method not valid, method argument not valid exception, and that's when you use the add valid annotation after this implementation, maybe at the controller level, to validate the inputs, and it throws this exception, and we're catching this exception, and then just reporting the appropriate errors to the client. So again, this is not full tutorial. So for the global exception handler, I'm thinking this is it, yeah. So we're going to be needing that user not authorized exception, yeah. Read file of so we remove the file, so we don't need that. User not found, yes, we need that. Validation exception, yeah, we need that. That's if we definitely implement another validation exception here, but for now let's just keep it. If we never use it, then I don't think this is ever used. Yeah, this is never used. So let's just remove it. If we need it, we'll use it. We'll create it back, right? And so just delete anyway, right? And this is what I'm talking about. So it's only used here. So we'll just remove that. And right now, for the user service, these are just the exceptions that we are using. Okay, so the exceptions, we could just rename that to exception, rather exceptions. So what we'll do is just, first of all, take that in here, put it there, and then in the exception, rename meet exceptions. So annotations, controller, DTO, exception, interceptor, AOP, model repository service, and then the utils, which we have not yet and we have the mappers, which of course we map. I think like mappers are like services, because like mapper service. Anyway, and then we have the applications themselves. Yeah, so I think that should do it, right? So if we go to controller, you shouldn't have an error. Yes, just to check that doing refactoring will not break anything. These are details, there should not be any error here. Yeah, so nothing. Login user, nothing. Yes. So exceptions, we've already checked that. The mapper, the implementation of the mappers themselves, they're okay. Okay, so it's not a red line. And the user mapper, same thing. The models. Use no other annotation. Let's see. Event listener. There we go. Entity listener. So repository, or our repository, I don't think we don't need this unsafe repository anymore. So we'll just remove that, right? Making sure that since we're not using it again, we have just what we are using, and then we have the services. Of course, we've really made sure that that's okay. And this application still starts the same, right? Only now it's much cleaner, okay? Because I can now just edit the respective services, right? So if I want to add a service, I'll simply just come and create the service here, a new repository, click the file, and then put the name, then create all these controllers. It is definitely a lot of work to do this, but it is important because when you're collaborating with people, it's easy for them to navigate, and basically editing one thing in here, right, does not break, it does not really affect the other services, right? Because, like I said, everything is self-contained within the services, and this is really this is the recommended path for monolith, the recommended file structure and approach when you're dealing with monolith, and this makes it really easy to just take this particular service or any service and extract it to its own microservice. And all you have to do is maybe change some configuration in the POM file and then some other things. And you could have like centralized configurations, and every service request a specific configuration, then doing startup, and that really does help. We're going to be looking at some of these things later on in the series, but today we're just going to start up the service again to make sure that everything works, except that yeah, so something is wrong. Validation, yeah, so we've moved that, so we should try that again. So we have like a builder, so except that jargon on my, right, so we have two global exception handlers. Notation specify bin name global exception handler for bin class. User service.exception global exception handler conflict with existing non-compatible bin definition of same name and class. Odd service exception handler. So we have two global exception handlers, which I think again we should just change the name. It's basically just a name, right? So we could just, in odd service, we could just go, so if we name, and we could just go, so no, global auth, right, exception handler, and I think for service exceptions, we could go global user exception handler, as we name, and we can go global user or user service, however you want to go about that, exception handler. Let's see if we face the same issue. No. So this time around, I think is okay. So I don't think I think it's failed to connect to database. My MySQL is, yeah. I think my MySQL is it's not up and running. So I'm just going to go to services. I turn it off by default to make sure that it doesn't consume. So if you go to MySQL, yeah, it's not running. So you need to start that up. Yes. And now I think if we try that again, that should run just as it should. Yeah, there we go. So it's connected successfully, and yeah, application has started up perfectly with no hinges, right? So it's all working again. But this time we have a cleaner version of code. I'm just going to go ahead here and commit these changes. don't think it's a feature. Is it feature based? Yeah, so oh so I was wondering, so basically it's git commit, not god commit. That's why. And if we do the push again, there we go. So right now we have a better file structure. And the next videos we're going to, I'm going to try to explain what I want to do. I think I've already done that, and we're just going to dive right in and do some coding. And this should be fun for those of you who love practical sessions and coding. This should be interesting. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.